Here we go. We're going to be talking about disaster recovery today. Okay, and that's kind of a big term because what does it really mean? Well, it could be earthquakes, fires, floods, things like that, but we're going to limit it to the computer world. And we're going to talk about our laptops and desktops and things like that. But this is something we looked at last week. This was a little cartoon that we had there last week. And here we are with our 500, this would be,
Trillion?
what is this? This is
500.
thousands,
Million.
hundreds, thousands, millions. So this would be 500 million gigabytes. I don't have a 500 million gigabyte drive yet. I hope I never do. Because the trick with computers is not so much just using them, it's learning how to manage them. So to manage your disk space is really kind of important. You can spend oodles of money on backup space and things like that, but most of us don't really need that. And so we're going to talk about how to do your backups and things with the reason about a disk space and how to keep your information organized. So this is probably pretty much true for most people. I know it's true with me. I got all this information on my computer, and I really only have like maybe 5 gigabytes of data that total on all my computers together that I really need to save. Okay, because most of it is operating system. The other stuff is receipts you got from Medicare or whatever, or the doctor and things like that that you save on there, but you don't really need. You might want to save your tax returns that you did in Quicken, or your databases that you use for QuickBooks or other applications. But most of it you don't have to save. And why don't you have to save your operating system anymore, like your Windows 10 operating system? Well, you don't have to save it because you can always restore it. You know, you can restore it and reset your system if things go bad. You don't have to back up the whole thing. But we're going to include backing up the whole thing in one of our methods today as we go through this. So I'm going to jump out of here and see if I lost everything. And we're going to go to this page here. I want to open up for me. And minimize this guy. Trust me, cloud security is so good. Our cloud security, you won't be able to access any of your data. Okay? Our security is so good, you can't access any of our data. Hi Steve, how you doing?
Good. Better late than never, huh?
So this kind of gets us back to a story that Steve has told us several times. If you want to be really secure, what do? You take a hiking trip to the middle of the Olympic National Park, and you're plenty secure out there. Don't have to worry about a darn thing. But as soon as you come back,
Except the goats.
except the goats, but those are gone now too. So, see, we have a way of getting rid of things like that. So anyway, pretty soon we're so secure that you're not going to be able to find or access or do anything to any of your data. So you'll be nice and secure. So this is another interesting one. It's kind of a play on words because that's really one of the issues that we have with computers these days is that I can say something to you in computerese and you will understand completely what I say in English and it doesn't make any sense to you because computerese is a different language. Okay? So you kind of have to put things in the context of computerese. Now this one on the right side here, this guy is doing exactly what they told him to do. Jim, and Jim's not here tonight. This is Jim. Jim was told he could back up his computer by making an image of his computer. Okay? Well, we're going to talk about making an image of our computer tonight, this evening. But is he making an image of his computer?
Yeah.
He sure is. He wasn't It's not a lie, it's the truth. But it's not going to save them in case of an emergency. Why? Because it's the wrong kind of an image. Because it's a literal image. It's a picture image. Two-dimensional. It's not an image of his computer information. So we're going to talk about using applications in our computer to make an image of your computer. Now, this one on the left. Don't worry. I'm sure someone remembered to back up the network before I erased all the files. You know, we take things, we assume things, and we don't know what assume means. Makes an ass out of you and me. You can't assume when it comes to computer. One of the reasons why I like computers, I was drawn to computers, why I use computers, and why it's my hobby is that they are completely logical. If something's not working, it's because either I made a mistake or it's because there was a mistake in the programming or something else that can be traced down. What would you use to trace down problems on your computer? You'd use log files, okay? We haven't really discussed log files very much. We're going to talk about them a little bit today. But log files give you a history of what went on with your system, and they're very powerful for troubleshooting. But if you lose all your files and everything, you're probably going to lose your log files too, unless you have them loaded somewhere that's off your computer. Hopefully someplace that is safe. And we're going to talk about what's a safe place. I'm not stupid. Of course I got a disaster recovery plan. Unfortunately, it was on my hard drive when it crashed. So where's your disaster recovery plan, if you have one? Anybody? Steve?
I've got it on cloud storage in 3 different places. I've got it on my hard drive, and a backup drive, and a flash drive.
So somebody give him a thumbs up.
All right.
Good job, Steve. Yeah, I mean, that's basically, you want to have it somewhere off your computer, someplace safe, okay? And that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking a bit about cloud storage and external backups and things like that, and why you should be using more than one method of backup for your systems. Not real clear. But I think we may need to update our disaster recovery plan. This one suggests we just run around in circles shouting, "What do we do? What do we do?" Well, unfortunately, that's the case in most small businesses. I'll bet if I went up and down the street in Squim here, this is what I'd find in most businesses and most offices and most people's homes. And truth is, for the average consumer, you could lose everything and be okay. But if you're in business, I think there's a statistic, like 80% of the businesses that lose all their computer data go out of business. So it can be a big issue if you're a business person. Problem is, people don't really worry about it until they lose it and they lost their business and things like that, and then they change their mind. But unfortunately, bad things have happened. Okay, and this little one here, it can't hurt to open one little attachment, can it?
Pandora's box.
Yeah, I've visited offices where they put ads on Craigslist, and someone answers them back, and there's a link in it or attachment, and they'll click on the attachment, ransomware. And all of a sudden, their files in their computer are unusable. You can't reach them. You can't get to them. So, yes, just clicking one little attachment, one little link can save you from a lot of pain, a lot of disaster. I think I've kind of gotten to the point in my life where I ask myself the question, how much of this do I want to redo? How much time do I want to spend on redoing it? And that's how I decide at what level I want to beef up the security or do backups on my system. I pretty much automated the backups, and I'm hoping that you'll do the same thing. Okay, we're going to look at a few pictures of places. So, when we talk about the cloud, we're talking about data centers, okay? And data centers are somewhere that's not here, basically. That companies have put their computers and networking equipment and their data center staff, and that's where they do the work. If you look at something like this here, this is, I haven't been there, but I bet if you walked into IBM, you know, this is the road that they show all their customers in their data center. It's all pretty, got a nice shiny floor. It's got movable tiles. Why do you think these tiles come up? Because that's where all the wiring and everything is up in the ceiling. They probably don't pull up this floor down here every time they want to fix something, so they probably have everything above the ceiling. When I was talking to Jim Hurley, he was saying that when he was working at a data center for the phone company, that they put all their wiring, everything up in the ceiling. So that's where their wiring is. Now this, on this side here, this would be either on the back end, or it could be back end here, front end here of another row of servers. So we have lots and lots of wires. And I don't know if you can see, but all the wires and all these different racks of servers, and each one of these racks of servers has 14 servers in it. So these are 14 computers here, 14 here, 14 here, 14 here, all the way down this row, and there are rows and rows and rows of computers here. We're talking about the cloud. We're kind of getting used to making you feel a little more secure, a little more home of what the cloud is, and why you should feel a little more secure about having it as part of your disaster recovery plan. Up on top here we have wiring, and down, if we look at the bottom here, you can see these little tiles on the bottom. They come up, and underneath here is usually where people keep their wiring and their other other equipment that doesn't go up into the racks will be down underneath the floor. And this is a couple of little suction cups that go to these little tiles, and you squeeze it and you lift them up, and the tile comes up with you. And you can see them in this data center here. You can see them on this floor here. You can see them in here. They have little air vents in there, so air can circulate a little bit. Air will move underneath the floor. But that's what all these servers are sitting on top of, is a raised floor in this picture. So why am I showing you this? Because this is how they keep it all neat like this. This and the racks above. And it's well organized, and it looks just like your desk or your computer is, right? Everything's all neat and orderly, color-coded, good circulation there.
I've worked in a lot of buildings where they were under the floor and above the floor.
Right.
And they got so much a mishmash of cables, you cannot pull them out
Yeah.
because they're crossed over each other. But it looks pretty on top, like Bruce says.
Yeah, it does.
Underneath the floor, not so much.
Right. So what you're looking at in these two pictures is probably some large organization that owns the whole floor, that owns the whole building, because you don't see any fences or cages and things like that. When you're backing up your data to Google, you know, when you're using Google Drive, or you're using your Apple Drive and backing things up on your Apple computer, or some of the other large cloud services, this is what they have. You're seeing this kind of picture here. For smaller locations, you're going to be seeing this, which looks similar to this, except there's a bunch of cages. And why are those cages there? Are they there to keep the text in or out?
Takes out.
Keep them out, right. Keep them out. So this would be what we would often see as a co-location. So if you have a smaller company, someone not as big as Google, or not as big as Amazon, or not as big as Microsoft, you're going to see companies buy space in a data center, and they'll have fences and locks on the doors and things like that. The techs will come in, they'll work on them. When you have a bad drive, they'll come into there, they'll fix the hard drive. You probably worked in these data centers as well. You've seen them. I have when you walk in the front door of these data center buildings, you have to sign in, and you have to do a scan with your eyes, and high security going in. When you check out, they make sure you don't have anything in your pockets and things like that, because it's supposed to be a pretty secure environment. It's kind of nice about these. If you have a power outage, you're going to have battery backup, and you'll also probably have diesel backup to keep power coming in, so that these services don't stop, so that they continue on all the time. Now, one of the things that you're not seeing in those racks is you have all of these. Anyone have a guess at what these little things are down here?
Hard drives.
Yeah, they're hard drives. And this is just part of one rack. Can you imagine row after row after row after row of racks of things of these? We're talking about thousands of hard drives, you know. How do you keep control of all those things? Well, there's not one guy with one PC who's keeping track of all those things. There's something called a SAN, or a storage area network. Basically, all of these hard drives and all the pieces that control them are hooked together into something called a storage area network. And they're in the data center. The data center LAN connects to it so someone can control it. All this storage comes together. They don't call it 1,000 disk drives, they call it their cluster fabric. So another computer-y type term. And that's where they keep their information there. Now, many of us are familiar with NAS, which is network storage. It's something you could have hanging off of your own network at home or in a small business. That's called NAS. And the corporate LAN would connect to these. So the SAN would be, if they have enough hard drives, they would be controlling the hard drives in one or more of these racks. But in a big series like this, where they might have hundreds of thousands of drives, they would have to have one or more storage area networks to control all the information that's traveling through. And we have something called RAID. Anyone heard of RAID? I'm not talking about the stuff that we kill insects with. Okay, it's redundant with RAID. I can't think of it right now.
Redundant array.
Of independent disks, or it used to be inexpensive disks, because back in the day, you know, you can buy a disk for $100, you know, and that's not a whole lot of money compared to the tens of thousands of dollars that you pay when you go through one of the big storage companies like EMC or something. And there's different ways of setting up RAID. We have like RAID 0, which makes them all act like one disk and just stripes all the information together. Runs really fast, but there's no redundancy, and you can't really recover from it very well. Then we have RAID 1, which is known as mirroring. And mirroring is a way of making the information on this disk exactly the same as information on this disk, on this set of disks. So if one of them goes out, all you do is unhook this one, and you can use the other side. Excuse me one moment here. So, and we have RAID 5, which is a way of spreading it out over more disks. And these parity disks are a way of keeping information for the other disks. So if one of these goes out, you can have this disk take the place of the one that went out and replace it. Now, what's kind of interesting is, having worked in the data center, that disks go out all the time, okay? And so you'll be sitting in the data center where all the people work in the data center, and they'll have pictures of their disks, and some might be blinking red, and those are the ones that need to be changed because they're getting warning signals from them. So they send one of the guys out to the rack. He pulls out the old disk and he puts in the other disk, and then he goes and finds another disk that's red, and he'll just be changing them out. So basically that's how they keep their disks healthy, because most of these can be swapped while they're still running hot. So you don't have to turn them off. In your computer, if you wanted to change the disk in your computer, you'd have to turn your computer off. Unplug it, change the disk, put it back in, turn it back on. They have the technology where they can hot plug it, and that way you can stay connected to your network. Okay, so here we are. Disaster Recovery Briefing, Squim PC Users Group. Welcome. Here we are. So basically, and we've heard this before, what have you got to lose? What have you really got to lose? Well, do you really have to lose 500 bazillion kilobytes of disk space, or do you have to lose 5 gigabytes of disk space? And most people don't even have 5 gigabytes of disk space that they use that is important to them. So we're going to be looking at a solution that's free, which is something we like, that will help you to manage that automatically. So we have documents, we have pictures, and we have videos. Some people have a lot of pictures, some people have a lot of videos. Those take up a lot of space. And you have to be careful that you have a way of keeping that information so that you don't lose it. So, see if my sound is working.
Do you suppose we'll meet any wild animals?
We might. Animals that raw? Some, but mostly lions and tigers and bears.
Lions
And tigers? And bears.
Lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my!
Oh my!
Lions and bears. Oh my!
Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
So anyway, the whole purpose of that diversion was we got lots of things we can lose, okay? And you wouldn't want to lose them, and you want to protect them. We also have programs and program data, configurations. I know that's your favorite word, Tom. All these darn configurations. Well, you want to save these so you don't have to do it again. You have your file structure, you have your profile. What's in your profile? We talked about this in the earlier class. It's your documents and your pictures that are related to who? The person who signed in on that computer. Now, if you have more than one person that's signed in on that computer, we're talking about a Windows 10 computer, if you have 2 people signing in on that computer, how many profiles are you going to have on that computer?
2.
You're going to have 2 user profiles. Now, you'll have a public profile as well, but we're not going to count that one. If you have 3 people, you have 3 profiles. Plus, it's in a you have to lose time and money and confidence, your sanity, your hair, and a whole bunch more. So that's a good reason to back up your stuff.
Is it like that? Is it like that?
See what happens?
Is it like that? Is it like that?
That's what happens.
I rest my case.
All right. So anyway, we want to be sure that we are saving our stuff, okay? The stuff we don't want to lose. So what can you do about it? So if you value your time and your data, and I know all of us value our time, I don't know how much about our data. Can't really get this out of the way, can I? There we go. You need to have a tried and a true working backup plan, okay? Now, I use 3 options myself, okay? And we're going to discuss and look at these because if I'm doing it, you probably want to do something like it yourself, okay? We want to create a system image, okay? Now, what is a system image? A system image, and you can do it with Windows 7 or Windows 10, but basically it's a snapshot of your whole disk. Okay, so if you create a system image and put it on an external drive and you walk away and all of a sudden your computer burns or someone comes in and helps themselves to your computer, you can put that image back on a brand new computer. Or if you really mess up on your computer, which some of us have, you can restore the image back to your computer, back from the day you created the image. The problem is, what if you created that image 6 months ago and you have data between the last 6 months that you want to save. So you have to continue with this plan. But the pros of a system image is relatively slow, and I'm going to take this down one side soon. It's relatively slow, but it's an effective way of system recovery. It copies everything. It makes a snapshot of everything.
Including the program,
Yes.
the application, everything?
Everything. It basically takes a snapshot of your disk, okay? When you recover your system image, it puts it back exactly like it was the day you created that system image.
So your Word program would be in there?
Yes, with all the files that you had created
Oh,
that were on your computer, and it's going to look exactly the same. Or you can move it onto another computer if you have to. You can restore it there. The cons, well, it's kind of being deprecated in Windows 10. It's still there, but Microsoft is slowly getting rid of it. That's because they want you to be using more of the cloud services, but they won't tell you that's the reason. For me, I create my system images using a program called iDrive, and we're going to be looking at iDrive. What's the one that you have, Tom? You have your online cloud backup. You have I can't. What's the
Carbonite?
Carbonite.
I don't use that
Sorry.
anymore, I let it expire.
But Carbonite is something else that would be an option.
Sure.
That would do. You can do a system image with Carbonite, and you can do other types of backups. But I use iDrive. First 5 gigabytes are free. I don't have 5 gigabytes in my profile, so I never hit the limit, and it's good enough for me. It happens every day automatically when I turn on my computer. It's kind of a nice thing to have, and it's in the cloud. It's on one of those computers that I showed you before in a data center. And it doesn't have to be on just one of those. It can be spread out over that whole array of computers in the data center. As long as the
cost you?
Hmm?
Does it cost you for iDrive?
No, not like, we'll look at it, but the 5 gigabytes are free. Yes, Steve?
I just want to make note that Shipley Center uses iDrives, and they pay for a contract that covers all the computers in the office.
Right.
And they have more than 5 gig. I think they pay. I
Well,
don't know what
the
they pay.
5 gig is the free,
Right.
and we're gonna look at their cost structure, but it's also very reasonable compared to what it would cost you in time and technical help and things to replace it all. And it's especially helpful for things like ransomware, because it's off your computer, it's in the cloud. It's very, very, very difficult for the ransomware to reach your cloud data unless you assign it a logical drive, which you actually can do, and that makes it as dangerous as any other disk drive on your computer. So you never want to, for safety's sake, assign your cloud computing, whether it's iDrive or whether it's Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive. If you assign it a drive letter, the ransomware may be able to find it and corrupt that data as well. We'll talk more about ransomware in a little bit. Now, file history. It was new in Windows 8. It keeps a history of backups, and it allows you to use a GUI, our graphical user interface, to restore your data. Okay, we're going to take a look at file history, how it works. But the pros are, it's automatic. It happens every day or every hour or every 10 minutes. When might you want to have it back up your files every 10 minutes? Well, what if you're working in an office on a project and you have some really important information, you're updating it, and you just made a call to Europe and they just gave you some stuff and you just typed it in. Well, and it's nice to have a continuous file history, but most of us don't fit in that category. For most of us, once a day is plenty. You don't even have to do it once a day. The thing about file history is I put my file history on an external drive, and we're going to look at the one I have on here. This one here is an older 1 terabyte drive. I probably paid like $79 for it. This is, I bought it a few years later, It's a 5 terabyte drive. I think I paid $89 for it. So holds 5 times as much. And what's nice about these, and you notice that there's no power cable going to these. We just have one cable here that plugs into a USB port into your computer, and it plugs into a different type of USB port that plugs into your drive itself, okay? And we'll take a look at how that works. So file history is something we should all be using if you're running Windows 8 or 10. And why don't we have Windows 9? Because 7, 8, 9, right? I'm sorry. Also on our Windows 10 computer, we have Windows 7 backup, legacy backup, which works the same on Windows 10 as it worked in Windows 7. And that's just basically a normal backup program where you can do a full backup and then you can do incremental backups over time. But it's kind of an old style backup, but it is time tested and true, so it does work still. I can still use this for Windows 7 and 10, but I've kind of moved on. Okay, I'm using system images and I'm using file history, and we're going to take a look at that. Okay, this is from kind of an article, and you can see that Tom actually has his own guide out there. But we have cloud backup services. Now, when you're talking about cloud backup services, where are you backing up your data to? You're backing it up to these drives, either in one of these cages here, that's a small business that's growing. I mean, they might have one in Seattle and one in Spokane. Or you're backing it up, like in case of Google or something like that, you're probably backing up to a location on one of these servers here. But this is what your cloud is. It's a set of computers in a data center somewhere, usually close to a source of cheap electricity, because these computers run really hot, okay? If you didn't have a fan on in this room, you'd be up at 200 degrees in no time. So these are air-conditioned rooms, so not only are you running power to run the computers and the hard drives and the routers and the switches and all the other things, oh my, but you're also running air conditioners, because if you don't cool these rooms down, you're going to have a heat event, and electric motors do not like heat very much, and you can actually fry the motor, you know, and anyway, there's usually multiple fans in computers these days. The hard drives have motors in them, unless they're solid state. Talk about these cages again one more time. So let's say we have a hospital in Port Angeles. Okay, they have a data center in that hospital where they have their computers and things like that. But what are they always talking about for disasters in this area here? We have a tsunami maybe, earthquakes maybe. But they have a lot of data that really needs to be saved, you know? So what do they do if they want to save that data and make sure that it's secured? Okay? Well, the hospital may have a data center in Liberty Lake or Spokane or Coeur d'Alene or someplace that's out of our earthquake zone here, that's not going to have any problem with tsunamis and things like that. Maybe wildfires, but they're not going to have to worry about tsunamis and things like that over in Spokane. So in a couple minutes, I'm going to tell you what they do.